In Canada, we're fortunate to have a culturally rich and diverse Indigenous community, including the Métis, First Nations, and Inuit people. That being said, our Indigenous communities have been systemically marginalized for generations. The legacy of residential schools where children were forcibly removed from their families has left deep scars, contributing to the erosion of culture, loss of traditional languages, and disconnect from ancestral practices. Today, these communities now face high unemployment rates and limited economic opportunities, all while fighting to preserve their culture and languages. While government funding exists for Canadian Indigenous communities, it has yet to create a truly sustainable foundation for economic self-sufficiency and cultural preservation. Despite these challenges, there is a powerful solution that addresses these issues. That is Indigenous tourism. It offers a unique opportunity to not only uplift these communities economically, but to protect and revitalize their traditions and languages. It isn't just about creating jobs. It's about reclaiming identity, sharing culture with the world, and ensuring that future generations can experience the same richness of Indigenous heritage. My name is Thexton, and that's why I partnered with ITAC, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, whose mission is exactly that. To understand how Indigenous tourism can create real change, let's hear from Keith Henry, President and CEO of ITAC.
Good afternoon. My name is Keith Henry. I'm the President and CEO for the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. I represent an industry of roughly 1,900 businesses in my role with our national board. We're a non-profit organization that specializes in the marketing, development, leadership, and partnership initiatives that are going to grow and maintain a sustainable Indigenous tourism industry and economy. There's often a gap in our ability to provide the kind of research that assesses the interest of Canadians and initiatives led by ITAC, such as the Indigenous Tourism Destination Fund. Therefore, this project that we've embarked on with our colleague is very important because it allows us to continue to assess and analyze and share that intel with the thousands of Indigenous tourism businesses and community-owned enterprises across this country. Very critical for our future development.
As ITAC strives to achieve its mission, one of the biggest challenges is understanding where Canadian travelers stand when it comes to Indigenous tourism. So I sat down with ITAC and we identified these 5 main objectives. For Canadian travelers traveling domestically, we want to know the current extent of 1. Interest in Canadian Indigenous experiences. 2. Knowledge levels of Canadian Indigenous product. 3. How far along interested travelers are in their trip planning process. 4. Willingness to spend on their Indigenous portion of their trip. And finally, 5. Their acceptance of ITAC's various initiatives, such as their Original program and their Indigenous Tourism Destination Fund. We worked with data collection and processing companies Insignia Marketing Research, Logit, and Maru. They helped us conduct an online survey with a nationally representative Gen Pop sample of 1,006 Canadians between the ages of 18 and 74 who have taken a trip in Canada within the past 3 years and or plan to within the next 2 years. This effectively selected for Canadian travelers. When constructing the survey, we worked closely with ITAC to make sure our questions and concepts regarding Indigenous experiences were accurate. Along with the quantitative questions, we also included open-ended questions to further gain insight. To ensure the questions and concepts were clear and had no unanticipated built-in biases, we made sure to pre-test the survey with the first 100 respondents so that we could make any necessary adjustments. Finally, we also conducted 8 travel trade interviews to also incorporate the travel trade's perspective into the study. The findings were clear. There is significant untapped potential in Canadian Indigenous tourism, held back by a lack of infrastructure and product knowledge. 66% of Canadian travelers expressed interest in Indigenous experiences. This is a huge potential market and signifies high interest in Canadian Indigenous experiences. there is a massive 68% of travelers who are positively predisposed to Indigenous tourism that are stuck in the awareness and dreaming stage. This is huge low-hanging fruit for ITAC to target. On that point, we also found that in the travel trade interviews that a big barrier to reaching the demand potential is a lack of infrastructure for Indigenous businesses. There is huge potential here for both ITAC and also the government to fund this. At this point in the survey, we also showed the respondents various real potential Indigenous experiences to gather their reactions and also to educate them on the full extent of the Indigenous experiences that are currently available. After educating the respondents, we then asked them the same questions as before again to see how their responses would change. So, post-exposure to the concepts, Canadian travelers' interest substantially increased by 15%, all the way up to 76%. This demonstrates an underestimation of what's available and solid potential for ITAC to pursue appropriate marketing communications. Of the travelers in the survey, 63% of them said that they would include an Indigenous component on their next trip. On average, those same people said that they would spend around $393 on the Indigenous component of that trip. Scaling this up to all Canadian travelers, the market potential could be as high as $4.8 billion, putting Indigenous tourism well on track to hit ITAC's $6 billion target by 2030. We also found major support for ITAC's initiatives, namely the ITDF, which consists of a 25-cent donation per transaction for the participating businesses. 69% of travelers supported that. And the Original program, where ITAC brands certain Indigenous experiences with a certification of quality and authenticity. 75% of travelers found that program useful.
A study like this is so important for Indigenous tourism in Canada. It allows ITAC to publish the report, which then reaches key partners like Destination Canada, Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Tourism HR Canada, of course, all of the provincial and territorial tourism ministries and partners that are non-Indigenous. It also allows us to share it with our Indigenous communities and all our Indigenous businesses across the country to give them more information and the importance of the domestic market and the growing interest that Canadians have for Indigenous experiences. And of course, it allows us to help move policy in Ottawa, working with the opposition parties, working with the current government, showing the ministers and the critics that Indigenous tourism is important in so many ways. These findings and these assessments of like the original accreditation and the importance of that marketing or the Indigenous Tourism Destination Fund shows the overwhelming support that we see Canadians care deeply about Indigenous tourism. And they want to see more investments for Indigenous tourism, and ITAC is going to bring that message forward through this kind of a report.
Alongside publishing the data on ITAC's website, we presented our findings to MP Baldinelli, the Member of Parliament for Niagara Falls, to galvanize political support for Indigenous tourism and its potential to uplift these communities both economically and culturally. In addition, ITAC is now launching the Original program globally, positioning Canada as a leader in supporting Indigenous communities worldwide. Most importantly, by uncovering this massive untapped interest in Indigenous tourism, ITAC is now much better equipped to educate travelers, enhance infrastructure through the ITDF, and secure further government investment backed by growing political momentum, especially with our connection to MP Baldinelli. A big lesson for me was that effective research isn't just about gathering data. It's about truly understanding the communities you're working with and ensuring the insights lead to real positive change. Looking ahead, the next steps would be to expand this research to international audiences. Understanding how global travelers view Canadian Indigenous tourism could open even more opportunities for growth. Through Indigenous tourism, we're not just creating economic opportunities. We're preserving cultures, empowering communities, and building a future where Indigenous heritage thrives. The impact of this research is clear. When we support Indigenous tourism, we uplift entire communities, ensuring their traditions and stories live on for generations to come. Thank you.